Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared and this is Keen Reads. Um, Today I figured I'd make a quick video. I think it's officially springtime, I think as of Friday. So I'm going to be making a current reads video as well as a spring TBR. So what I plan to read in the next couple months or probably a month or two. Since the last video though, I have finished 2 books. Been reading a lot of smaller books lately. I've also had some time off work. I go back to work tomorrow, which stinks, but so less time to read. But I read Father Goriot or Pierre Goriot. I'm not sure how you say it, by Balzac. This is the first Balzac I've read. It was pretty good. That's a glowing review. I actually really liked it. It was Balzac. I think he wrote it in like 1839 or something. It takes place in 1819 in France, and was really the impetus to starting the realist movement, is what I understand. So he was like the forefather of like Flaubert and Zola. I don't know who else. But really enjoyed this. This is also part one, or I guess book one in his Human Comedy, which is his magnum opus, I would say, of trying to represent all of humanity in his books. In contrast to the Divine Comedy, he made the Human Comedy. So this is like the entry point and the first book typically read in that sequence. I think it's like 75 books, stories, and things like that, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But I will read more of him. I did enjoy this. And then I just finished last night Between the Acts by Virginia Woolf. This was her last novel, her 9th novel. It was actually published posthumously because she passed away before it was published, obviously. And I like this one more than Night and Day. It was more similar, I would say, to Jacob's Room and her later novels than it is to her first two. It has that experimental form. It also is written partially in verse because it has to do with a play. So as far as I'm aware, I don't think Virginia Woolf wrote any poetry other than what's in here. If someone's aware of any Virginia Woolf poetry, please let me know. But as far as I'm sure, the only verse she's written is in this novel. So that was interesting. Like I said, I liked it more than Night and Day. It would probably fall in like the lesser half of her novels, though. So behind like The Waves, To the Lighthouse, The Voyage Out, probably in there with like Mrs. Dalloway and Orlando is where I would put this. But just like any Virginia Woolf novel, it will repay rereads. In fact, I find myself almost rereading Virginia Woolf as I read her because there's so much you can miss. And if you check out for even a little bit, you'll have no idea what's going on. Let's see. Here's a quote that I highlighted. I'm not sure if it will make sense out of context, but I'll just read it. That's the question. And if we're left asking questions, isn't it a failure as a play? I must say, I like to feel sure if I go to the theater that I've grasped the meaning, or was that perhaps what she meant? Ding dong ding. That if we don't jump to conclusions, if you think, and I think, perhaps one day, thinking differently, we shall think the same. I really like the last sentence. So that was the main reason that I highlighted it. I didn't read anything out of this. Let me see if there's anything short and sweet that I highlighted. He had a lot of like turns of phrases that I really liked. I learned what it means to be poor when I longed to have riches to give my child. Obviously, fatherhood plays a huge role in this book from the title. If the human heart finds time to rest as it scales the heights of love, it rarely pauses in its headlong slide into hatred. That's just 2 things. What I'm currently reading, so continuing or starting one of my goals, I think this is the last of the 5 goals that I have not started yet, which is getting into the Romantic poets. So I'm about 50 pages into the collected poetical works of Coleridge. So far, it's kind of his juvenilia. I found one poem that I really liked, or that I liked enough to highlight at least, and that is called On Receiving an Account That His Only Sister's Death Was Inevitable. So kind of a downer. But currently reading through this. I imagine it'll take me a while. I think it's like 500 pages. Well, it's like 600 pages, but a lot of it, or not a lot of it, At the end, there's a lot of fragments and like first drafts and things like that, which I don't plan on reading because I don't really want to be an expert in the Romantic poets. I just want to be exposed enough to appreciate them as well as understand their influence on later literature. And then I'm going to be starting this today. I've started the introduction actually already, which is Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. This is the second Henry James that I'm going to be reading. I read What Maisie Knew a long time ago when I was really first getting into some more serious literature, and it was really difficult for me. But I hear Henry James is the master. Excited to get into this. This is another long one. These penguins can be deceptive. They don't look super long, but I think this is also like 600 pages of pretty small text. And this one isn't a specific reading goal. It's just one that I've had on my shelves for a while, and I want to get around to it. So every couple of books or so, I like to just pull one off my shelves that's been there for a while and knock that off the list. So this is what I'm currently reading along with Coleridge. And now let's get into my TBR for the rest of the spring. I'm not sure the order that I will read these in. I do know that the next thing that I will read, I think, is going to be Amulet by Roberto Bolaño. So I really like Bolaño. His most famous books are The Savage Detectives and then 2666, both of which were phenomenal reads. I also really liked By Night in Chile. So this will be my next entry into his works. I recently asked a group of other booktubers or just literature avid literary fans, not my fans, fans of literature, in a Discord that I'm in, what are some other Bolaño books to read? Because as far as I know, it's kind of like By Night in Chile, 2666, and then The Savage Detectives. And they recommended Amulet as well as Distant Star, I think is the name of it, and then Nazi Literature in America. So those are the three I'm kind of keeping my eye out for, and I found Amulet. So going to read this next, I think. Not often do I read contemporary literature. Contemporary as in, I think he died in the early 2000s. But again, I think Bolaño is worth it. I think he's going to be remembered. Not that the only literature worth reading is that which is going to be remembered. But another modern book that I'm planning on reading, probably not directly after Amulet, is Austerlitz by W.G. Siebold. This is another one that I actually got. I've heard it. I've known it for a while. It's pretty popular if you look up like top 25 books of the last 50 years or something like that. It's going to show up on there usually. And recently in that same Discord, they shared an interview of Siebold that I watched and was pretty interested in. So I figured I ran across a cheap copy of it and was like, might as well read it now. So Austerlitz. What I'll probably read in between Amulet and this is going to be Moments of Being, which is Virginia Woolf's posthumous essays, including her A Sketch of Myself, I think is what it's called. No, A Sketch of the Past, which is kind of her autobiographical essay. I'm fairly close to completing my collection of the complete essays of Virginia Woolf, but I picked this up because I don't know if her posthumous essays that were published after her death were going to be included in those volumes. But I don't mind reading them twice if they are. So Moments of Being. And then two books that go kind of hand in hand. One that's been on my shelves for a long time, and that is Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Or David Defoe? Daniel Defoe? Daniel Defoe. So this is, obviously we all know what this is, the classic novel. This has been on my shelves for a long time, and I finally found the impetus to get me to read it, which is Foe by J.M. Coetzee. So I've read a couple of Coetzee's. I've read Disgrace, and I've read The Life and Times of Michael Kay. And this is kind of, when I was looking through his back catalog, this is the other book that kind of stood out to me as something I'd want to look out for, and I finally found a copy of it for like $2. It was awesome. And from what I know, this is a retelling of Robinson Crusoe. So I figured kill two birds with one stone, read a book that I'm really looking forward to, and also read a book that I've had on my shelves for a long time. I imagine that this, how many books are these? I don't know, 5 or 6 books will take me to mid to late April, probably. Maybe longer. The Coleridge I'll probably still be reading by then, because I'm only going to be reading a couple pages of that a day, I think. Well, maybe like 10 or 20 pages a day. I don't know. I try not to read too much poetry at once. But yeah, so those are my current reads, some reads I just finished, as well as what I plan to read in the next couple months. Thanks again for watching.